And also, one of the most interesting things about history of immigration, particularly the Chinese, is because that a lot of the time Americans prescribe to the belief of the American melting pot. The belief that when immigrants came over, they would assimilate into our culture and they would learn to appreciate the way of life, and they would basically shed all of their previous ties to their mother country. That didn't quite go the way that everyone planned. As a matter of fact, of all the Russians, all of the Chinese, and the Irish that came over, they kind of stuck together. And this is where we get Chinatown, Japantown, and then there was Germantown, and also there's
their own neighborhoods.
Yeah, and also we even have streets in San Francisco, like we have Moscow Street. So
lots of Russians. A lot of Russians came in. Sebastopol, the Russian River, all that area, and up there, the Russians had settled.
Especially during World War II, because not just because of all the fighting that was going on, but because of the Stalinist regime. It was very, very brutal, and they all wanted to get out, and they were voting with their feet, and they saw America as really the only place they could turn to. And that's what
most people did. That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here. Yeah.
That's the Shasta Dam, and that's the Engelbright Dam over there. And they don't need salt water exclusively. They breathe. They have lungs, so they can stay in fresh water, whereas great white sharks might not be able to do that. Or the orca either. The orca is actually similar family, more closely related to dolphin than whales. They're like a big, big, giant dolphin. And so she might be afraid to come back out, and rightfully so. She's going to have to run a gauntlet. That used to have huge acreage in front of them. It didn't stop them. Then there was the hurricane.
Imagine right now it's Pablo Bay.
This is like Pablo Bay.
We see the South Lido too.
And yes, in ChinaCamp, there is a sign, so keep your eye open. We'll walk around down there and look a little bit at ChinaCamp.
Imagine right now that you're flying at altitude of 12,500 feet. That's what it would look like at that altitude.
So the day is a little bit distorted because the model was too big to fit in the old parts warehouse. So they took Sassoon Bay area here, and the model was built specifically to test one theory, and that was the Reber plan. John Reber was a fellow that lived in San Francisco, and back in the 40s there was a drought just like we're going into today. Usually it's 7 years in, 7 years out, so we're going to be in for a world hurt. Anyway, after the drought, he decided, well, we have all this fresh water. That big yellow stripe, it was never constructed, but the Army didn't want to take any chances. They wanted to make sure it was going to work because people kept talking about the peripheral canal.
And it still keeps coming out.
It was voted down in the 60s, voted down in the 80s, because people in Northern California were worried about sending more water down to Southern California. So instead of 1,100 miles of antiquated levee, and they proposed an engineered canal from the mountain to Sacramento.
Hey, I was just inside and I just there. There it goes. Wonder.
Is that in?
That's out. That's it. Yeah. That bounced over here.
Where's the line?
There.
How about the
Right, the tree.
tree?
That's right here. The tree's pretty far.
Yeah.
That line, it bounced right here.
Okay, restart. Watch out the line, okay? Nice.
Oh, are you okay?
Yeah.
Yay! Andy's good, but
I know, it's inconsistent.
your hand's gonna hurt a lot. Yeah.
Ready? Andy got 5-4. Andy. 6-4.
Oh, outside.
That's out.
Just out.
To Point San Pedro to make a motion picture. John Wayne was the star and Blood Alley was the movie. By adding a few sampans to the cove and an outbuilding here and there, China Camp became a cinematic recreation of what China Camp had been all along, a Chinese village. China Camp has been a state park since the late 70s. Frank Kwan, the son whose parents fished the bay and ran the general store, still lives here at China Camp, still walks the fragile pier. Store, and perhaps to listen, as the constant tide washes against the timeless shores of China Camp. I'm George Watson for My 20th Century.